How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? It's D.H. Thorne and his buddy Waylon, the Sorcerer Ahrimanahsul. I always get that mistaken, of the Black Tower. And this is Dark Sorcery. We're going live tonight to discuss, the subject of, I guess, how do we want to title this? Failure in Magic, or just failure in life?
Magic. We're going live tonight.
So what I have noticed is that a lot of people, assume that people who are good at this never have any failures or never screw up or always get things right. And sometimes that's kind of one way of looking at it. But what do you think? Do you think, because last week we did a live stream, we talked a lot about how to have success in Magic and how to have added success and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, we did. And one of the reasons why you and I were able to come up with so much concerning the success is because of the number of failures. Because remember, boys and girls, you can't be a pimp at Magic if you ain't learned to be a bitch first. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. So, Magic's just one of those things where, you might automatically be really good at Magic, and just, be a natural and be awesome. And then there'll be times when all of a sudden your shit just seems to fizzle, or you ain't got, there's no energy to put into it or something. Something happens and you either don't get any result, you get a half-assed result, or you get the opposite of what you were hoping for.
And it's interesting because there's different ways of looking at things. We could say where even that failure is probably your true intent manifesting in spite of what your words were. That's one way of looking at it. When you fail, it's maybe not always the best thing to say that you failed unless it was, really, really, really off the wall, which can happen too. I personally hate failures in Magic on one level because it's not like in other skills where when you fail, you can learn from it and do something differently all the time. Sometimes when you fail in Magic, there's nothing to learn from. It's literally just a setback that can actually harm your I don't want to say faith, but your belief and your ability to trust what you do. I've noticed that happens, especially to newer people.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I guess farewell to people I'd like to give is, may your gods be kind to you. Because, if you're going from anything from the Necronomicon where they talk about, the gods are far away and forgetful, or you're talking about, the gods strife with mankind, being kind to spirits, or they aren't kind to you, or anything like that, anything that could affect your Magic. That's why I came up with that saying, may your gods be kind to you. Kind of like, may the winds favor you, or something.
Yeah, may the winds favor you. I would, in a way, be kind to yourself. I mean, it's not a monkey's paw. That's one thing I don't like is you can get paranoid and say, make sure that you do things a certain way because it will backfire if you don't. Like if you ask for this, you're going to always get the negative version of it, like it's a monkey's paw, like that old story where if you ask for $1 million, you get $1 million, but your father's going to die to give it to you, and you love your father, something like that. Now that's possible, definitely possible, especially if you're working with baneful forces. But I think that people can get paranoid sometimes, also in that they will have these fears and these things, and that can lead to a problem too. That means your intention is maybe based on maybe fear or something like that. That can also be potentially a big problem.
Yeah, it can. But there's lots of things that can affect or hamper or anything of that nature, and I'm not talking about necessarily whether you're all, you're up to snuff, that that you don't have sickness or something like that. Just normal, run of the mill. Like me being exhausted for the last 3 or 4 fucking days, honestly, any kind of magic or effort that I've put into it, unless it's been to affect my own energies, it's not been doing anything. So, that can affect it.
Yeah, it can really affect it. And you can also have a situation where you can end up, like this time of year for me can really mess with me and mess me up. Like it can just make me not care about things. This winter these winter doldrums, I guess you could say. And it's not because I don't like winter. I love winter. I've always been into the dark and the goth stuff. So to me, the winter is like my favorite time of year. But at the same time, it can still, it's like it's like cabin fever. You can get pent up and just not feel like you can do anything. Nothing sound, you get depressed is really what it is. Seasonal depression. And that'll suck it right out of you too, because if you don't have the emotional energy, you don't have the spiritual energy, if you don't have that holistic energy working for you, then even an invocation to a spirit won't work. Like, for example, a lot of the times I will work with a spirit just by calling to them. I don't always have to do an elaborate ritual. Sometimes you do. Sometimes they want you to, but sometimes they just want you to call on them and they'll show up like it's nothing. And I recently called upon King Paimon, and usually he's somewhere in my vicinity and I can always get a hold of him. And this was just recently, and I tried to contact him and he just literally, I still haven't heard anything from him. And I think part of it is because I didn't offend him or anything, but in my attempt to contact him, I was kind of half-assed. I was kind of like, I drew a sigil and I stared at it and I did my thing. And I said, please come, I want to talk to you. And I didn't get a strong response. So I said what I wanted, and that was it. And I'm much more likely to, especially with King Paimon, considering his status, I like to do a ritual for him when I can. I like to sing to him, and I like to do that kind of stuff. I didn't do that this time, and I don't think I offended him, but I also feel like the message that I was getting by him not coming and not even responding to my request it wasn't something I needed his help with. It was actually, it's more like when you're a little kid, and I said this to, I think it was S. Connolly today when I spoke to her on my wall. I said, it's kind of like when a parent is teaching you to ride a bicycle and they take the training wheels off or whatever, and they give you a little shove and you're like, oh no, hold me, mommy, hold me, daddy. And the parent's just like, no, you got this. Go ahead. Sometimes that failure is what that is, because you don't need magic for everything in your life. Sometimes you fail because you're supposed to figure out how to do this without magic sometimes too.
Yeah, for all the workings that I did for years to bring things into my life, I think the last 2 years taught me the most valuable, important lesson. That, the first year I started doing the pact working that I did with the spirits of the Necronomicon, I gave them a year of dedication. And after that, it was like, I understood my role, my place. My place wasn't necessarily to rely on a spirit to do a fucking thing. It was to rely on my own intellect, my own will, and my own physical action, That's why I go on and on about, make those phone calls, get out of your house, go to the places you've got to go, do things you've got to do, Magic is supposed to supplement your physical actions, not supposed to replace them.
Right. And I think it's important. You had Guy Creasy on recently, and that was one of the things he was talking about with you, was that he'll do a working for somebody and they'll say, oh, I'm not getting any results. Why am I not getting any results? What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? And, he'll say, did you make the phone call to try to apply for a job? Or, or in other cases, it won't necessarily give you the thing that what I call your ego is looking for. It won't give you what your greedy little personality wants. It's going to give you what your higher being wants you to have. And so, like he had said something to the effect of he'd give you like a love spell or something like that, something to help you with love. And you might not get the object of your desire. You might not get the apple of your eye, but that energy is still around you. Just go to the club and try hitting on girls. The one that's meant for you is out there, probably going to respond to that very strongly. And sometimes that brings up like the skeptic, because the skeptic will say, well, how can you prove magic's doing anything? And we can get into that in another chat, in another discussion.
Well, but I had a cool story about that love and shit. So back 17, 18 years ago, I was with some buddies, and we used to put all our magic shit in the trunk, of the car, our books and shit. And we go out clubbing, all this other stuff. And one night I was like, what, fuck this, I'm gonna use citron. So I go and I'm like, anoint the seal with oil and everything else, calling on them and stuff like that, and inviting them, and tell them what I want, And let's put it this way, for the life of me, I had a little bit too much to drink, so I don't really know what the fuck. But I know I woke up with 2 bitches, and I was sitting there like, what the hell happened? I couldn't remember any of it. I got what I wanted, but I couldn't remember a fucking thing that happened. That was pretty fucked up.
I think like what'll happen is too, like, you know, Magic likes to work with, you know, through us too, like especially through us. Like I always have the best luck in my Magic is when I'm trying to do things through myself rather than other people. Like the less variables you can put in the situation, the more likely you are to get a result. So if I'm, you know, if I'm doing something like you're talking about, like if I'm going for romance or something like that, instead of trying to influence other people with the Magic, I try to influence myself. I'm going to be suave today, you know. I'm going to be
set the battlefield, man.
What's that?
You have to set the battlefield.
You have to set the battlefield. Yeah, you have to clear the field, and you got to lead the charge. You know, you can't expect everybody else to do it for you. So, a lot of the times, that's why things work the way they do for me. Is I try to be the one that the Magic is working on, not necessarily all these random people that I don't have any control over. Because, especially when, you know, that's a big area of failure, is when people are trying to influence other people, because other people are gods as well. They have their own ability to literally just, you know, I don't want to say shrug off your magical effects, because they don't, but they are masters of their own world as well. You know, like if you and I were to bump heads, there'd be a lot of fizzling and failures going on, because we're both protected by things and we both have different things going on that, you know, maybe I'll stub my toe real hard tomorrow and you'll spill a beer or something, and that'll be the extent of our death curse on each other. So it counts as like a fizzle. But then you have even people who aren't practitioners, even people who don't know what they're doing. You know, that of course would be the conversation we had about baneful magic, but that's a big area of failure, is trying to bend the will of other people. It's not an easy task. It's really more about convincing them to bend their own will, I guess would be the better way to put it.
You know, it's a lot like, you know, for example, you know, I may have some great defenses and shit, but like you were explaining about how to get, you know, certain aspects of it some of it can't get through. You know, I either come down sick as shit, or, you know, something crazy just like out of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. You know, and then it's a matter of, you know, checking, do you have a fever? No. Then why is your body acting like it has a fever? You know, I mean, you see what I'm saying? And as far as like baneful magics and shit like that goes, man, there have been a few times in my life where I've been out to get a motherfucker, and I mean just pour myself, whole heart, mind, body, and soul into it. You know, strip them of their defenses, do all this, that, and the other, let it go. And then come to find out they're doing better than they were before. And I'm just like, what did I do? You know, well, they eat this shit for breakfast.
It's like, can I get a refund for my candles?
You know, and maybe they do, because I've met a few people that are able to transmute one type of energy into another. They have like different techniques of how you can do that with your aura and stuff, but the majority of practitioners don't think on that level. They're not strategic. Mm-hmm. And there are times, even when you're strategic, dude, there's sometimes when, I don't know if it's because their spirits are stronger or strong in general. I won't say stronger, but just strong. I have no idea. I don't know if they have enough people behind them that, you know, it's creating one hell of a shield for them. I have no idea. I think it all goes back to the whole, you know, why is it that the good people die and leave this fucking earth and we're left with the fucking dicks, you know? I think that's the biggest failure in magic right there.
I don't know. I don't see it quite like that, because I see it as those people are just there to be part of the show, and it's up to you to not be a dick in the face of that, I guess, would be, or to be a bigger dick, maybe even is the point. I don't know. You know, why not? Yeah. But we're surrounded by that stuff, and you know, I think it also, you know, when we're talking about it like in the form of baneful stuff again, you know, I think like I said before, you know, a lot of it comes down to your truest intention. What is and that goes around to all your forms of magic. You know, you'll get a result, but your true intention might not be what you specified in your words, and this conflict can either cause a fizzle or cause things to happen differently too. So, you know, maybe if you're trying to get rid of dicks in the world, it's really that you want them and you need them in your life to help you grow.
Well, see, here's the funny thing. Like, I agree with opposition. We need it. We really do. But you know, it's a shame when it seems like there's more of them than there are the good guys, so to speak. And I don't mean like good guys, bad guys, but you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Kind of messed up. You got the decent good people, and it's like it's like they're totally outnumbered. You know, 10-1, and they're hard to find. You know, few and far in between for that fact.
You know, they say we hate most in others what we despise in ourselves. So I always try to be careful. I'm of the same mind in that I don't, you know, we had this conversation in private the other day. I'm an extroverted introvert. I'm one of those people that I like small groups and I like getting to know people individually and one-on-one. And I like being the center of attention. But at the same time, I don't like going to the store. I fucking hate everybody that I know, you know, that I don't know, if that makes sense. Whenever I walk around, these people it drains me, and that can cause problems too. But that can also empower you too when you don't like everybody, when you have this feeling. But I generally, you know, I look at it like we're all just a bunch of animals on this dirt ball. Yeah. And a lot of animals are, you know, the way they are. And since as a non-dualist and with my way of thinking, I don't think of them as good, bad, or any other thing in between. They're exactly what they're supposed to be. Yeah. And, you know, the good people, like when we say like, oh, it sucks when the good people get taken from us and all that, you know, that's one way to look at it. Or it could be looked at as, you know, that's their gift. They're liberated. Or it could even be, this is from
the asses.
Yeah, they're being freed from the asses. Or like whenever I get a dog, I like, fuck, this is 10 years of love, and then it's gonna suck because they're gonna die like 10 or 15 years later. Like, I love my dog. My dog is like one of my favorite living things on this planet. I would kill you, everybody in this room, except for my wife, for that dog.
Yeah, she'd kill you.
Right. No, she's got more freaking defenses around her than I have around me, probably. But that's a joke. But seriously, when you find an animal that you care about, you know, this animal's teaching you your non-attachment by, you know, you love this animal, but it's going to have to go. And unfortunately, as human beings, we are like any animal, and we try to make things smooth and easy for ourselves whenever possible. You know, there's no reason to suffer when you don't have to. And because we tend to do that so much, I think it can actually lead to us weakening and becoming more sensitive to these things. But I also know that there's a subtext to what you're saying. I know that there's some things that you're going through right now that are making this pop out for you, and that can make everything fail for you as well. But you know, it's also this time of year. You and I aren't the only ones who are talking about failure and Magick right now. Like, everybody I'm talking to, it seems to be a very common theme. People are they're taking breaks for a few months, or they're just not into it this week.
Or they're just now getting back after a month hiatus. I saw that in somebody else's post.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I want to come back to something you said. You made a point about, you know, we ate most in others what we ate, or we ate in others what we ate most in ourselves. Okay, so let's go with that for a second. You know, I have the ability to be the coldest, cruelest motherfucker on the face of planet Earth. I really do. I mean, seriously, a body and step the fuck over and just not think a damn thing about it. I mean, I have that mentality. I save that for war, and I save that for those who deserve it, but it's still there. And so I guess what I actually may hate in others is the fact that, you know, it's not necessarily jealousy that, you know, they can be so open with it, but, you know, angry that they're callous with it. You know, that they're just, you know, oh, I'm going to attack this person just because I fucking can. Bitch, please, why don't you try that on me? Let's come on. I like a good fight.
Yeah, in a way, you're kind of saying that it doesn't bother you that evil is done. It's that it's done with indifference. It bothers you that it's done with such indifference. Like, you know, like when you...
I hate. It's not necessarily the
action.
I appreciate you pointing that out to me. So I'd actually like word that better.
Yeah, like when you're driving down the road, right, and someone is road rage or not, they just don't care if you live or die. They want to be in your lane. They don't give a fuck what they do to you. And it's not the evil act that bothers you. It's that they didn't give a shit. And they thought so little of you as a person that they would do this. That I think it's difficult for people to see that sometimes, because we associate them like they're the same thing, but they're not.
They're not completely different.
They are completely different. It's the intention that's bothering you, or the indifference of your existence.
But then that can affect our magic.
Yes,
that whole argument within ourselves, it can affect it. Like, for example, there have been people that I've gone after, and it can be really close motherfuckers. And, you know, people I thought the world of, and just all of a sudden, knife in the back. And I'm like, I'm returning this favor. Here's your knife back. I think you lost this somewhere.
Mm.
And there'll be a small part of me, just a small part, that sits there and says, Waylon, just because you're able to do this, why would you? Because one thing that I have to be very careful of is that when I actually do something, when I actually go after somebody, and this isn't ego talking and saying nothing like that, but I'm goddamn good at what I do. And when I go after somebody, I have to be willing to watch it go, because I've seen it happen one too many times, you know. And but it's also a part that has to be fed within the self. I mean, you have to give into that. But the thing is that once you start to do it, it becomes commonplace that every little nuisance, that's how you react. And then what happens is you end up destroying yourself, and that, you know, that's in line with the subject topic we're talking about tonight.
I was gonna actually bring it around again, because I was gonna say, if you're responding to somebody, then they're actually the one who's in control of the intention. So if someone has made you angry at them, if they're the one who's caused you to want to destroy them, then they're the ones whose intention is actually being followed more than yours. So I find that, you know, reactionary magic is always a bad idea. Like waiting for you to be homeless or about to be homeless to do a spell for money is potentially going to fail more often than, I'm doing pretty good like that. Let me do a spell for a little bit more extra padding on my money to make sure I'm going to be safe in the future. Because if you're so attached to the problem and to the solution, then it's the one that's controlling everything in a manner of speaking. Because you can find yourself very easily, you know, deciding the fate of somebody just because they did something to you. So again, who's in control, you or them? Now they don't want it to be destroyed, so you know, there you go. You'll get a flub. But that's not always the case. I mean, there's definitely ways around that. But these are all the pitfalls that we can fall into when we're doing anything. We have to make sure that we're in line with what we really want, and not just reacting to a situation in a way that makes us feel good. You know, feeling good is not the point of magic per se. Feeling good is a thing it can do for us, but that's not the point either, is it?
No, it's not. You know, a lot of it's the fact that, you know, all these things that we take into consideration, we can either overthink it, and I like the way my dad always put it, study long, study wrong. And there's a truth to that, because the more instinctual something is, and the less the mind is involved, the more successful you are at it. And yet sometimes you need to put some thought into what you're doing. Sometimes you do need to hold your own hand, and then, you know, and just let the motherfucker learn on their own. But
Yeah.
that's part of learning. That's part of, you know, failure and success.
Yeah. I mean, going back to my bouncer days, you know, like I was obligated to do certain things if someone was doing something, but my intention was to protect the place, not to hurt the person. So, or to do the job that I had to do. And that makes it different. Now, if my intention was to hurt the person, I would have been in the wrong, you know, in that sense, in that ethical sense. And in the same way, going back to this thing we were talking about. Now, what do you think about, you know, failures with spirits, particularly? Because spirits, that's another, you know, being you're dealing with. What's that?
What do you mean? I mean, what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, that would be either failure to make contact.
Spirit?
Say it again.
You talking about the failure of summoning a spirit?
Yeah, well, all of that, failing to summon or failing for them to manifest what they said that they were going to manifest for you. That's an important part of a possible failure too.
Okay, so I have a great story. So I was originally in a really bad place, and we were trying to get control of our lives and all this other stuff. And I had this was back, oh shit, man, 4 or 5 years ago. And so I called on Belial, and I drew a sigil upon my hand, and had offered blood to it. And I mean, and I was just, you know, trying to just radiate this being's energy, and just, you know, trying to connect with it most clearly. And I was like, you know, help me to build my kingdom.
Yeah.
And oh, after about a month of working and seeing no results, like none, I was like, well, shit, you know. I didn't know what to do, so I was like, well, fuck it. And I tried something else, and something else actually worked, which that's not the point. So years later, I look back on that. Now I understand why I failed. Why I failed was because, I was treating Belial like he was going to make it happen. I wasn't treating Belial as somebody who could give me advice, ideas, or suggestions to better my own situation. And that was my failure, and that was my bad. It's like, and when you're talking about like actually summoning spirits, have there been spirits that I've summoned that didn't show? There have been a few on and off throughout the years. In the last 23 years or so, there's been a few that when I went to call them, like 1 minute I could call them just fine. The next minute I don't know. I had angered them. I don't have a clue what happened. To pick out one in particular, I couldn't outside of Tiamat. The very first time I ever tried to summon Tiamat. I realized real quickly that there wasn't enough of a connection. There wasn't enough. There was not enough for me to connect with her. I didn't understand her, because you have to understand spirits to a certain degree before you can fully connect with them.
You got to harmonize with them a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and so the first time I tried to summon Tiamat, wind still went real quiet, and then nothing. It was like a vacuum. And some would say, "Oh, well, that was Tiamat in blah 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 form." Well, maybe so. And I never treated it as if it was a failed summons. I mean, I thanked her, gave her, license to depart and all that. But the thing is I was trying to get conversation, is what the whole summoning was about, not necessarily her presence, but to start a dialogue with her. That's been my experience. That's the one that stands out the most.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few, and I think a lot of the time it's because of like what you had said with Belial. Sometimes the biggest reason that we fail is because we misunderstand what the spirits are for, and maybe not for, but what they're about. And we think of them. I'm always preaching to people: don't think of magic as a vending machine where you put in your wishes in a couple of quarters and you get what you want. It's not a genie. This is a path to a spiritual evolution, and not a path to material gain, And I've had like sorcerers that were self-proclaimed masters chew me out for that. Say, no, magic is about getting what you want. Well, all right. My point is that just like what you said, when you're working with Belial or any spirit and you're saying, do it for me or whatever it is, you can totally misread what your relationship is supposed to be like with Azazel that one time when I had him and I had communication working with him. And I had him in my ritual chamber, and then I said, like a jackass, I said, give me a strong physical sign or something. I was looking for a parlor trick. And what happens? Nothing happened. In fact, it went like a light, like somebody shut the light off and he left the room. And I was like, oops. And he came right back after a little bit, but it was like, I definitely stepped on the wrong toe, because it's not what they're there for. They might, like, some spirits are very friendly and genuine, and some are very arrogant and they'll do things. Like certain spirits will love to do these parlor tricks for you because that's what they're about. Some love to cause storms. Some love to do these other things. But a lot of them have nothing to do with that. Now, Azazel, for example, what is his big thing? It's about warfare, and it's about taking your sins and using them as a sacrifice, and teaching you how to, work with people with the makeup and stuff like that, with glamour. It's not about making things go bump in the night. So it's an incompatibility. It's a lack of resonance, and that can be a very important thing. Like, I don't think I'm going to ever be able to work with every spirit ever. You're just not going to resonate with every spirit there is. Even if you are, like, for example, really into the Goetia, you may never evoke or invoke every one of the Goetic spirits. You may never reach them all. I'm very much into the Lovecraftian current, and I'm not into more than really, Nyarlathotep is the only one that I really make a strong connection with in terms of ritual. And Azathoth, I kind of view as a piece of that non-dualistic current that we talk about. So I have a feeling I'll be able to resonate with him, and probably Yog-Sothoth, but like Shub-Niggurath, I tried, I couldn't get a thing out of that one.
Wow.
And
I'll throw out something interesting. The hardest one to connect with is Azathoth. When they sit there and they say the mad idiot god, or the living insanity, or whatever you want to call it. I don't think it's quite like that. I think what it is that your mind cannot fathom the mentality of a being of that nature, of his kind of insanity, and that's why I have a problem, connecting with Azathoth himself. However, working through the other ones, they're quite easy. Matter of fact, the first year I was working with the planetary spirits, it was really fucked up that every time I'd walk a gate, I was having what seemed like an encounter with one of the old ones. Like I would do that right. Well, I'd go to sleep and I would dream about one of the old ones, like as if they were in concert with one another. It was really, really weird. And then come to find out that certain planets connect with certain of the old ones, and that's why that was happening. But that's but then again, it's like I said with Azathoth, it's just for myself, it's kind of hard to do.
Right. Hold on, I'm messing with a setting here. I'm trying to fix it.
Yeah, I see that.
I'm not sure what I did. I was actually trying to do something else and I clicked the wrong button, so hopefully I didn't mess this up. It looks like we're okay.
Yeah.
I think what happened was I'm trying to get that so we can see the picture-in-picture, so we can see each other's reaction, because that's not popping up on the feed. So, but
yeah, it's only doing it on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I don't know why it does that sometimes, but that's not a big deal. Yeah, and I mean, going back to Azathoth, I think for me, I don't want to give the wrong impression, like I can connect to him and have like long conversations with him. It's not how this works. I wouldn't even call him a him. It's more of a principle. It's more of an energy pattern. It's more of an idea that you can't fathom, you can't understand, because it's a being of the void. It's probably one of the few spirits that I think Azathoth is it's like when we say neti. You're not going to know it. It's not this, not this. You're never going to know it correctly, because it's the void. It's an aspect of the void, and the void is an unknowable thing because it's directly opposite of the mind. You'll never really get a full grasp of it. So when they call it like the blind idiot god, in some ways, like I've said before, I think Lovecraft may have been either inspired by I can't think of all of a sudden, Vishnu from Hinduism, which is a sleeping god that's dreaming the world, which is essentially the same thing as what Azathoth is, but he kind of created a dark version of that for his stories. That doesn't mean he didn't connect to a real being. It just means that he, just like we do, like when we're interacting with spirits, what do? A lot of the times what we see is a product of our own imaginations as inspired by their energy and their current. So he may have tapped into that, and because of his connection to darkness, and to the spirits of darkness and all that stuff in his dreams and things, I personally really do believe that that's what happened with him. He was an unwitting, medium for these entities, and this may have tainted his view of the entity that the Hindus would call Vishnu. And that's a possibility. And I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's a possibility. But again, when you try to connect with Azathoth, it's definitely going to be more of like it's just like a rapture that doesn't always turn out to be useful for you, in the sense that you might not get useful information out of it, and you might not get a result. Like if you say Azathoth, do this for me, and good luck. It's going to be more like the spirit of it's kind of like if you could see reality for what it is exactly for just even a split second, you'd be driven instantly insane. And it's kind of like that.
Well, see, I sit here and I say one thing, like, blind idiot God, and I talk about connection and stuff. This makes it short and sweet for like videos and stuff like that. But the honest answer to me is that they can call them gods, they can call them this, they can call them that. But the way I look at them are forces or powers that we mimic. And I don't know how to explain that any better than that. But I will say this right here about them is the fact that the emotionally based reactions that are within the human psyche were created by them. And to understand them, you have to understand that, like fear is we consider it a natural reaction. It's not natural. It's very unnatural, and these beings created that within our psyche as we were being developed and formed over the eons or whatever, however fucking long mankind's existed. So I look at them in a non-traditional manner. You have to think outside the box when working or dealing with them. Like you can use their callings and stuff like this, but you're not sitting there trying to imagine a being that looks a certain way. You're tapping into the emotional reaction that comes from saying their names, and that energy that arises from that reaction being tripped is what actually allows them to take whatever form they're going to work with you individually. And that's what I meant by that.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily, like I said, it's not that I think of them as like you would if you were going to call Odin or, any other deity. They don't, any of the Goetic spirits, you can call them and they might appear in a certain way or so forth and so on. But the old ones, they don't do that. They don't do that at all.
Right. And I've noticed like different pantheons, different entities, different groups, they will interact with you differently. Like I have bring up all the time with the shadow people, they're more about causing fear, uncomfortableness, negative energy, anger, this kind of thing. And we're getting off into the weeds on a different topic, but that's also important. That could lead to failure because you could be expecting something. You could be expecting an emotion or a thought or a vision. This is what happens to me a lot of times with novices. They'll come to me and they'll say, I did everything that you said, or I did everything that the book said, I did everything that the ritual commanded me to do. Everything went well, except I didn't feel or see or experience anything. And I'll say, what do you mean? Were your eyes closed the whole time? Were you asleep? Because you did experience something. It's just you might not have noticed the thing that you were supposed to notice. I mention to people all the time, like when we're talking about opening your third eye, that's when you're starting this path of magic, the first thing is you have to learn how to enter trances. You have to open that third eye. You have to get sensitive to what's going on, not to like a master level. You just have to be able to do it a little bit. It doesn't take a lot. Sometimes all it takes is just go watch a whole bunch of horror movies and some religious stuff. Yeah. Get yourself into the mood for it. And sometimes that's all you have to do. But you do have to learn to meditate into trances of some kind. You have to have an established way of reaching an altered state of consciousness that you can rely on, and you need to be able to move energy around and stuff like that. So, but you have to open your third eye, and people don't realize. Now, everybody experiences this differently. No two people have the same experience of the third eye, really. But a lot of the time, when we're talking about an open third eye, we're not talking about suddenly you see ghostly shapes everywhere, or suddenly you see an aura appear around me, or anything like that. That may be how some people experience it, but really what it is it's more like you're looking at one of those 3D puzzles where when you stare at it and you cross your eyes and suddenly something pops out at you that you didn't notice before. So like it's like with the incense, with the video I did today with the manifestations, it's just swirls of incense, okay? But the fact that it looks like something to you is your third eye communicating with you. And if your third eye is open too far, there is such a thing, your imagination goes buck wild and creates hallucinations rather than actual visions. Whereas if it's underdeveloped, you'll just say, no, that was just smoke. That didn't mean anything. Yeah. And that's really the nature of the third eye. The third eye is not that you see something that wasn't there before. It's that you recognize something you didn't notice before. It's an opening of an eye. So when someone's coming to me and they're saying, I didn't experience a spirit, I experienced nothing. Nothing happened. Nothing happened at all. My first impulse is to be like, are you really counting every experience? And then they'll be like, well, no, maybe it was when XYZ happened. And in my video that I did today, I talked about that, where when my familiar Nicodemus responded to my request for a strong audible sign, it was a train going by my house. Now a train goes by my house all the time. And normally I wouldn't, why would you count that? It's a normal event. But then I had to realize it happened within 30 seconds of when I asked him to do it. Yeah. And I realized that he might've been, because it was the horn blared, and I realized, the horn could have blared anywhere along this stretch of track here. Why did it blare right when it went past my house? So they're very subtle, and this goes back to what we were talking about before. Magic is a very subtle thing. It tends to, for the most part, with exceptions, you can have miraculous events. It tends to happen, on a subtle level. It doesn't move mountains overnight, but it will cause earthquakes or avalanches, and they're going to seem like rational events. that have a purpose. So why should they do, you know, parlor tricks for you? I consider that like a gift when I get a strong manifestation. That's like a he must, you know, that spirit must have really wanted to connect with me that day.
You know, but say, like, you know, think of it, for example, stuff you and I sit here and we talk about, you know, 27 years ago when either one of us started doing any of this shit, you know, how much of it do we truly fucking understand? We sit here now, you know, and we're masters of self, and, you know, we understand all these different things. But I promise you, when we first awakened to it, when we first went to working with it, we didn't know jack shit about jack shit.
I can prove that.
What's the third eye, you know?
Fuck the third? And not only that, but sometimes, like me, my ego would get the better of me. Like, I don't need a third eye. I just do what I do. Fuck third eyes. What's that Asian shit? Get the hell out of here with that. Meanwhile, I'd be going and like doing everything with samurais the next day. Yeah, no, you're. I mean, when you're a stupid kid, man, and that's probably where my best failures happen, my funniest failures, and some of them are not that funny, but a lot of my failures were, you know, I want to put it this way: failures in magic are usually a failure with the self, and not with the magic, and not with anything else. It's usually just like with your third eye being unable to interpret what you're seeing as a sign or a symbol or an event. You can also misinterpret what your role is, and you can misinterpret what the goal is. You know, when I was doing this as a young man and I had my cult thing growing and all this other stuff, and some of the pictures I showed you when I was during that time, you know, this is a thing that caused me a great deal of pain eventually, because I was on the wrong path. I was doing it for the wrong reasons. It wasn't fulfilling me the way I thought it would. It was damaging. And like you had mentioned one night, I don't know if it was on a live stream or not, but you had mentioned that when I first got back into this again recently, when you first learned about me, you could see that I was like edging off. I was going off that edge a little bit to where I could have gone full dark again. And I could have collapsed into that truly, you know, just dark expression, that unhealthy dark expression of what, and that was probably my biggest failure in magic, was that I had embraced that darkness so hard because it was the only light I had, so to speak, that I had mishandled and misappropriated that. And I do want to actually, in a minute, but I want to give it back to you in a second. But Randolph Dulfer did mention something that's kind of relevant to what I'm talking about. He's talking about controlling your emotions. And one thing, as my mystical experience will tell you, is controlling your emotions is a fool's errand. You can't control your emotions. That's impossible. All you can control is your reaction to your emotions. You can control your what you do with those emotions as you feel them. So, for example, in the martial arts or in the military or something like that, you're going to feel fear. It's unavoidable. If you don't feel fear, there's a screw loose. Okay. It's very rare for someone to not feel fear. I'm a big, strong guy, and I could fight somebody a fraction of my size, and for a second, I'm still going to feel a little fear, because you don't know, that guy might have a knife. You don't know what the heck's going to happen. So you're going to feel a little bit of fear. The feeling of fear is not the same thing, or the experiencing of fear is not the same thing as letting that fear rule you. Now, that's what we mean when we say control your emotions. It doesn't mean that you can start and stop them or prevent them or tuck them away. You know, a lot of people reading his comment might think that that's what you're supposed to do. You should stuff your fear and not feel it. No. Feel your fear and act anyway, or feel your anger and don't act, or feel your hunger and don't eat. Whatever that emotion or sensation is, the space between your thoughts are what's in control, not those thoughts, not those emotions. And I just went around a whole bunch of bases, so I'm just going to.
Oh, yeah, you did. Well, that was pretty good. You know, I think one of the most dramatic failures that I have ever done to myself, I think it was either the first or the second year me and my wife were married. I was a big fan of Aleister Crowley, and I'd read Moonchild, and we were trying to have a kid early on, and oh, me and my cult dumbass self, I decided, you know, why not just have not just a child, but a magical child, like in the flesh, you know?
Right. Like create a vessel for a spirit kind of thing, you mean?
Oh yeah, something like that, using the womb as the
sounds like the start of a horror movie, or maybe the intro to the novels I'm writing.
This gets awful. So I do this full-fledged fucking purification phase and period and stuff. It wasn't so important on the wife's part because, you know, first off, she's not into high magic and stuff like that, you know, and it's a little bit out of her. That's out of her playbook. that's not her stuff. And I went through this purification phase and everything else leading up to this. I had made sure that, you know, the stars and the moon and also the shit were right and all this other stuff. And just created out of nowhere this full-blown right for it. And had used Lilith as the because she's the mother of abominations, she's the mother. And so in a sex rite, using her, you know, and you have to visualize most perfectly and you have to do all this stuff. And then you ground it out with the great rite, you know, and planting the seed and stuff. It's how fucking thousands of years ago, it's why, you know, temples had high priestesses and high priestess shit. It's why Jesus was said to be so fucking special. Is because, you know, he was born of a they would call it a sacred marriage. Mm-hmm. And what it is where the priest or priestess would invoke a god or goddess. And there would be this huge rite. And usually this was done with kings and rulers and stuff so that they would have strong seed. And the Norse did this a lot. And anyway, they would get it on with the high priestess or high priest, something like that, and either become pregnant or the high priestess would become pregnant. And they would give birth to this magical child. So I was using the same formula of how to do this. And yeah, what I created wasn't a magical child. Oh, it was magical, all right. It was the first time I created a succubus. And, hey, up until this past month and a half, I never knew what I did wrong, and I'm not going to go into what I did wrong, but I know I did it wrong now. I didn't give it exact directions or instructions to enter into the womb and to be born physically. And man, I was struck with this like all the time, man. Just fucking always feeling drained, powerless, and just all this other crap. Couldn't figure out what it was. One day I managed to get a good glimpse of it and realize what the fuck this was because it was coming to me in my dreams, you know, getting it on with me. Well, at first I thought, hey, man, I have wet dreams, you know, who wouldn't like that? Yeah, I don't like that. Not that type of wet dream, I don't. So, so I went through everything I knew, and I couldn't figure out how to get rid of this. I mean, this thing was stuck to me because I had put blood and semen into it. I mean, I had truly fucking made a fucking succubus from hell. And eventually, I had to give it away. Eventually, I just gave it to a really good person that just really fucking needed it.
You pimped out your spiritual child, dude? What the fuck?
I didn't pimp it out, man. I gave it away for free. I didn't even charge for the gift.
You know? I hear what you're saying, man. That sounds nuts, man. I don't know how I'd respond to that.
Really deserved it. I mean, really fucking deserved it. Because they were having problems at home. They thought that they would start causing me problems, and I'm like, no, I've got the solution to your problem. You ain't getting you none at home, so you're being an asshole. Here, you're gonna have the wettest dreams you ever fucking had. Congratulations.
Yeah,
yeah. That because at the time, you know, I had no idea how the fuck, you know, to undo what I did because I put so much will and so much intent and power into it. And yeah, that's the biggest failure I've ever done with, you know. But it wasn't because the right was wrong. It wasn't because of anything like that. But it was just because of something really stupid simple. I forgot to tell it to enter into the womb and to manifest as a physical child.
You got something.
Just for a lack of simple instructions, the whole fucking thing crashed.
Now, if we go back to our original concept there of saying that intention is the mother of failure, maybe is a good way to put it. Are we sure that maybe you just didn't have an intention that you weren't aware of? Maybe you had a deep, dark desire to do this instead, or, you know, should we do some shadow work? Now, I'm not going to get into this. So I don't want to embarrass ourselves because I think we'll embarrass everybody.
No, it wasn't anything like that. I've always been conscientious of the aspects playing in the background because I've always been aware of the fact that the subconscious is actually more in control than the conscious is. Because the subconscious runs like the operating system on a computer. It's always running. It is always running. It's always doing what it does. And it's the subconscious that's actually programmed, but you have to program it through consciousness first. That's why repetition, repetition, repetition. So,
And keep in mind, you're dealing with spirits too. They have a mind of their own, and you may want something and they want something else.
well, I'm not going to lie. Should I have maybe created a bit of a better connection or relationship with Miss Lilith? I probably could. It wouldn't have hurt. Instead of like, oh, I'm gonna call upon this spirit and see how this works. Yeah, I probably should have put some time into that relationship and been like, hey, help me make this thing correctly.
I mean, especially with Lilith, I think but that's I haven't worked with her, and she comes to who she chooses. This is not someone that everybody can work with. Lilith is a entity, and nor should everyone try. I mean, Lilith is like we want to talk about an independent spirit. This is a wild and free spirit, unlike many others. Like Lucifer will come to everybody if you've got an open invitation on the table. Lilith is like, I do what I want. She's not going to just come.
Wild, free, female entity.
Right. Like the wild woman. She's every one of those archetypes, and I don't think, I actually don't think she'd have a problem with me because I tend to be very respectful of that. But I'm not, keen on calling that. And that's actually a potential failure in Magick as well. You may need to invoke a spirit that you don't have a connection with, or enter into a mindset that you can't enter into. I feel like if I tried to work with Lilith, I'd be too tongue-tied trying to have conversations about what she thinks about, various issues in the world that are related to gender right now. And that would be wrong. This is not what she's about. And I'd probably screw it up.
Oh.
And there's so many things that she represents that are powerful and free and important that I would rather wait for her to approach me strongly and say, I want to talk to you now. Because that's just how I am with certain spirits in particular. Lucifer, I called to a point, but he actually came to me a long time before I ever had anything to do with him. He was that voice in the darkness when I would be thinking I was talking to God. It wasn't God, it was Lucifer. I had no idea. And to me, that was like, that's how it should be for anybody. Like Lilith is like up there with Lucifer. She's up there in that upper level of
that upper one.
Yeah. And you don't command them. You know what I mean? Like you can command lesser spirits, and you can be authoritative with other spirits. Lucifer, I'm not authoritative with in the sense that I don't command him, but we do treat each other in an equally kind of, but he talks to me like in a syrupy kind of way, like, oh, my beloved, my this, my that. He loves to butter you up, and he loves to make you feel powerful and important. And, so I return that favor with him too. But, he's a higher order being. Like, he's not one where you just go, come and kill my enemies for me. No. That's not going to work like that. And Lilith is much even more strongly than that. I would think, because the little bit that I've sensed about her and that I've heard through the spiritual grapevine it's not an easy spirit to work with. So I'm surprised you had the result you had go the way you had and not much worse.
I actually have way better results with her. Here's why. Okay, so the average male thinks, monogamy. They're like, they want to find that one person that's right for them and all this, that, and the other. Now, I'm not saying Lilith can't work with that. Lilith does. But the thing about it is that a man would have to be willing to embrace every aspect of woman, including the hoo-ha. And because these are all natures that are found within woman in general, which, same for man. Don't get me wrong. I'm not being sexist and talking shit about females. It ain't that. But the thing is that a man approaching Lilith has to embrace Lilith for everything that she is and everything she's capable of being. When you learn how to accept a woman in real life this way, then call upon Lilith and watch how she reacts. That is the utmost respect to hers, because, and that's the key.
Yeah.
Working with Lilith. Now, another deity that's rather interesting to work with is Hecate. Hecate is, she's sexual too, not in the way that Lilith is. Which, it's funny, I don't want to go off into a certain direction here, but I'll
I thought we were talking about failure, not how to get laid in Magick. What?
Yeah, right. But no, it's a little bit different. So, like, you can expect one spirit to react the way that another reacts to you, so forth and so on. But that's trial and error, and that's where that ties right in with the failure and magic part.
I mean, there's that, and like we were saying before, you can have all kinds of misinterpretations. But at the same time, like, one of the misinterpretations that we have, going back to what I said before, was that there is necessarily a right image or a right name or a right this or right that. And one of the things I'm covering right now in my book actually is, I'm going to bring this up every time we talk on video, is my book, is this one section I'm writing is about, like, the kinds of things that spirits will give you are for you. And this can lead to failure in the sense that, like, let's say you're trying to evoke a spirit for the first time. You don't know anything about it. You have your Goetia or whatever it is you're using. I'm going to use the Goetia as a reference because that's the one that most people think of. It's usually the Goetia or related. It's usually that Judeo-Christian pantheon. So you're using your Goetia and you look up the spirit, okay? Or you look in your book and you say, well, especially if you're using the original, there's very little in there except for a description of the spirit, its name, its sigil, and how many spirit. Sometimes don't even include the legions that it has. That's some people say that's an older or a newer thing, but there's none of these associations with planets or incense or anything else that you find all over the internet. And you'll sit there and you'll say, well, I need to work with this spirit. I better make sure I'm finding out the right information, right? This is what I actually answered a question like this today. Better make sure I'm getting the right information before I work with the spirit. I want to make sure I get the right incense and the right color candle and what's the correct end and how do you say his name and blah, 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 blah. And what ends up happening is they don't realize a couple of things. One, the spirit's probably already in contact with you. You don't even have to, all you usually need is just your sigil and the intent and the right vibration, and you'll probably get it. If not, then you're probably, you might have to struggle a little bit. But number two is that those things that you're looking for, what candle to use, what planet they represent, what tarot card they have, all this kind of stuff, that is personal gnosis that was given to someone by the spirit for use by that person or by the community at large. Now, that doesn't mean that they are locked into that. That doesn't mean that that's all that is representing of them. You can actually have, like, I've dealt with spirits and they'll give me stuff that completely contradicts what is given publicly or what people use frequently. And it's for me. This is what they want me to use or what they want me to associate. So people can have a failure in that regard because they can go trying so hard to reach out to what the world says the spirit is, this mechanical, this materialistic vision of what the spirit is. The spirit is none of those things. The spirit is not its sigil. It is not its name. It is none of these things. You and I, we live in a material world where you and I have a face that we recognize. We have a name that we recognize and an address and all this stuff that we associate with one another and creates an identity. These spirits are not identified by any of those things that we are used to. They're identified with emotions, with resonance, with things like you were talking about with Lilith before. It's a free entity. Now, how did you and I both know? I never worked with Lilith, but I know that she's a free and wild kind of spirit that, especially if you're not able to accept her as she is, you're going to have problems. I know that intuitively. I don't need to experience her to know that. I don't care what she looks like because she doesn't look like anything. People get into this mindset where they need to know all these details and get them just right before they work with the spirit, and they don't realize they're limiting themselves. Number one, they're limiting how they can see the spirit. So when the spirit comes to them and they don't see that, they don't think they get something. Like we were talking about before, you got something, you just didn't recognize it. So you have that really can be really distracting, So I'm often encouraging people, like, when you're having failures, especially in contacting spirits, put away all that superfluous stuff, put away what incense they like, just pick an incense you like. Don't worry about what element they are. Have all the elements represented on your altar. Have your fire, your water, your air, your earth, okay? Empower them all and just go with the flow. If you start to feel like the spirit needs a certain element more, then charge that with your energy. Charge it with your focus and your intention and your energy. Pick up the candle and pump energy into it. And if it's a fire elemental, for example. So you don't need to have what this stuff all tells you. You need to instead open yourself, let these spirits come through, and then ask them for it. It's so much more effective and useful. And you don't end up with these hangups. You don't end up with these problems where you get people telling you, oh, like I had somebody tell me, oh, you weren't working with Azazel because that's actually the sigil of Jupiter. And I'm like, well, I mean, a Saturn or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. I mean, I don't, that's not how this works though. That's not, I could use, I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful to Azazel, but I could wipe my behind and put it on the table and still summon Azazel because he has nothing to do with that picture. That's a gateway. That's a way to empower the summoning. It is not him. He is not a sigil. You know, people get wrapped up in these materialistic, you know, bullshit that fucks them up. I just waited till you had to drink. That's why.
Speaking of which, I want to throw something out there at you. Like, did you know, for example, that a lot of those seals and sigils of those spirits, they're not actually for the spirits. They open the door to the realm from which the spirits hail.
Yep.
Like you take the sigil of Lucifer, for example. It literally brings you to the pyramids of the city of the Pyramid of the Sands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's rather interesting because most people, they wait on something to come out. But if you were ever to take the seal or sigil of these spirits, empower it like you would a gateway, and walk through it, you are then entering into the realm of that deity. And now if you do something like that, it's hella more powerful to call them from their side, because they don't have the distance to travel and all this shit to go through.
Yeah, that's like what it's all about, isn't it? Walking all those different gates. That's pretty much what it's all about.
Yeah, that's why I'm all about the gates. That's why I love Yog-Sothoth, because, you know, due to that being's influence and gnosis, I mean, I've come to understand a lot of shit about a lot of things just because of the perception change, right, or shift, or whatever you want to call it.
That's actually a good point you made too, because that could be a source of failure for people too as well. I don't usually do that, like what you said about going through the gate to them. I'm aware of that. I remember when I was younger, when we would use things like that. You know, I mean, you have to remember when I started out. Again, I often repeat this. This wasn't based on any tradition or practice. I had no idea how sigils worked. I just draw things that I thought made sense, you know, and I'd call them my magical symbols. I didn't know what the hell they were. You know, I didn't know what I was doing. And I would make connections with spirits. And sometimes I think to myself, well, if they're coming through this, maybe I can go to them. So there is that, but there is also, you know, people can have failures because they're so busy trying to bring things through when they're themselves supposed to be going through. As you said, meeting them on their side is just as important. And, you know, that's something even I'm going to look into a little bit more as I go through this. Because that, you know, what is it when I would do, like we would do hypnotic stuff. That was one of the ways we would actually bring out entities, was I would go into a hypnotic trance with people. And what is that if not, you know, your mental astral self entering into another phase, into another world, essentially, and allowing something else to come through, and you are the gate in that instance. And you know, so I definitely resonate with that idea. I think that's something I'm gonna have to look into. I did know that, you know, like a lot of times those sigils, those seals, they can represent something else. They can have planetary influence. There's all this stuff. Remember we talked about the biophotonic energy. You know, this light that's coming from the sun hitting these planets coming to us is a different wavelength and all this other stuff. You know, these spirits can use those as portals and pathways to us as well. And we can fail because we don't recognize that sometimes. But I don't want to get too mechanical in my spirituality. I don't believe in that stuff matters to the point where you will fail just because the moon wasn't in the right phase. I don't believe that. It's a strong influence, but it's not the point.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Seriously, honestly. Like even
especially with spirits.
You know, especially with the workings I'm presently doing, working through the Mark Allen Smith books. I learned something real. I learned it the hard way. As advanced as those books are, keep it simple.
Yep.
And you know, don't get too carried away with it. Just, you know, because it's not about all the details.
No.
It's just about the connection and creating a connection so that you can enter in and out, so that you can shift back and forth in consciousness.
Right.
And when you got the basics of it like that, you'll notice that a lot of so-called mistakes after that will have only been because of, you know, small crazy shit, like, you know, you weren't in the right state of being or state of mind, whatever you want to call it, you know, you weren't, connecting the dots or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can cause it, but keep it simple. That's where we make our biggest mistakes, is not keeping it simple.
In some ways, we sometimes talk about the advantage of the novice. They don't have all these built-up ideas that can screw them up, and by keeping things simple and just going on, your belief and your anticipation even of something happening, you can have much more powerful results. Like, I mean, sometimes I look at my book and I say, well, I don't use everything that I'm putting in this book all the time. Some things I'll use it only once in a while. And one of the things I want to stress is that when you're using something like my book, there's going to be a lot of methods in there that you can ignore, and you can mix and match them. So long as you have a holistic expression of what you're doing, like as long as you have a spiritual, a mental, and a physical component, and you can use whatever other symbolism you want. You can keep it as simple as, Alfredo Martinez, the founder of the Dark Sorcery Facebook group, he put a video up just before we went on live, showcasing a tarot spell where you can take a tarot card and using visualization and energy stuff, you can bring about an effect. And it doesn't get too much simpler than that. If you watch his video, I don't know if you have a chance to watch it yet, but it doesn't get too much simpler than what he showed. And it's a very effective. I'm watching it going, yeah, that would absolutely be, what's the difference between that and using a sigil or whatever else you like to do? Like I often say, like, magic is a form of play in a way, because it's a lot like what children do with their make-believe games, except that there's an added element of sophistication and maturity that goes into it. So a lot of what we do, like, I mean, it's almost like we're playing Let's Pretend, but the Let's Pretend actually will do something.
Well, I've said once or twice, I believe that the universe was created out of play.
Yeah.
And there's a thing to be said about, the devil is in the details, and it's all about the details. But then at the same time, man, if you're consumed with detail, you're going to drown. You're not going to float. You're not going to swim. You're going to drown.
Yeah.
So, there's such a thing as I don't know, you got to keep a balance with it somehow, some way,
Yeah.
Be attentive to the details, but don't be so consumed with them that you're like waiting on the perfect, crystal ball or spirit of scrying item, or this, that, and the other. And, I've got to have this tool to work. No, you fucking don't.
No. You know what? I got to give a shout out to VK Johannem. He actually did he mentioned something, and he pulls up a PVC stick, PVC tube, and he's like, this is my ritual staff, and it's fucking powerful. And I'm like, damn right, it probably is, because that's generally how it manifests. I mean, you could, this is my wand, a freaking, Jedi screwdriver. It's not, but I'm saying that what's the difference?
This is fire.
Right. Exactly. And my only caveat would be, again, you need a physical, mental, and spiritual component. If you're working with elements, you need a representation of the elements, but it doesn't have to be some big fancy or amazing or anything. It just this is just a vessel for whatever intention that wand represents. It doesn't have to be made of anything special unless you believe it has to be made of something special. I will say that when you do have that belief, it can make it more sacred. I have a wand that I carved out of ebony, and I did it for the S-Ben Kane's working with the Black Book of Avasthal. And I was originally, I wanted to get a nice long piece that would look like a cool wand, and I could make it look crooked and nasty. And then I'm like, as I got this piece of wood, it's only a little bit longer than this incense box. It's like maybe like this much longer. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with this? That's not a wand. That's like a dildo. What the hell am I going to do with this thing? And then I realized, well, a wand is just, a wand is just an expression of the male, creative force is what the wand represents. So I'm like, what else represents creative force to me? I'm not going to make it into a penis. It's just going to be like weird for me. So what else does it represent to me? What else would represent that to me? What symbolism? And I like to use pop culture in my magic a little bit. I don't use it like I invoke pop culture entities, but I use it as inspiration. I'm like, well, you remember Darkness from Legend, and he had the unicorn horn. So I'm like, what if I carve this to look like a badass black unicorn horn? And I did, and I started carving it. It ends up looking like a black unicorn horn. And I became more and more attached to this thing. And because I like, I think that your magical tools are best when you make them yourselves. Like, I can't stand using too many things that are store-bought for long. I like to graduate to something that I make or find or comes to me. Magical tools should come to you. And that could be a source of failure too, is that if you're hung up on making sure you have, you know, not just a crystal ball, but a natural crystal ball, or making sure that you have not just an ebony one, but one that is the right length that you carve for yourself, or that is made by a professional, or the right book, you know, like that one always kills me when someone says, oh, you know, the Necronomicon's not real because it's not a traditional true Sumerian text and all this other stuff. I'm like, that just shows you don't know what the hell you're talking about, because that's not how it works. Pick the book up and try it, you know. I mean, it's not my current, but I've picked up that when I was a kid, 12 years old, 13 years old, getting into this, listening to Slayer spill the blood, and I'm freaking, you know, cutting myself and putting blood on the pages trying to make stuff happen, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just being a jackass, you know. I was being the kid in the mirror saying Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. But I felt things. I mean, there was, because of my own mentality about it, I felt things that were real, and they followed me around. It was a real thing. You've had even better experiences with that, though. That's where you're really, you know, that's like one of your fortes is that.
I don't know about better experiences. I mean, you know,
oh, I'd say better. You finished the whole working with it. I haven't even, you know, I did some dabbling in it, and it almost killed me. So
oh, no, I'm just now finishing the second of 3 years, about to start working with the old ones. And I think that's where the true work's actually going to be, to be honest with you, because they're the ones that called me to it in the first place. And so, you know, doing the work. Now, have I seen bad shit? Have I seen dangerous shit? Fuck yeah. Dude, I'm telling you, there are things in that book that are not friendly to man. Period. End of story. One way or another, there's a reason why they have exorcisms. There's a reason why, you know, you always have to work with your watcher, and why you've got to keep your protective wards on you and stuff like that.
In fact, we should make that part of failure too.
Well, that never allowed fear to stop me.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it drove me further. I'm like, well, fuck, man. If it's supposed to scare me, it means there's something there.
Right. It's something there you have to push through. You know, I mean, a lot of my failures came from the wrong intention. It came from the desire to achieve, accomplish, do, or whatever, things that were not really what was right, or even irrational. You know, one of the things that got me turned off to magic, made me a skeptic, was because at some point I developed all of this. I'd seen so many things. I had shadow spirits. I had all these things that I was working with that I could see, that other people would see. They were physical manifestations that were happening, you know, that I don't expect people to believe watching this now, but that I did experience. I had people experiencing it with me, to the point where I got cocky and I started to think, well, if that's possible, then I should, just by invoking my energy just right, make this pencil float in the air anytime I want. And I hit a roadblock. And once I started thinking that way, it started planting seeds of doubt in my mind, because I started having failure after failure after failure, because my intention was completely wrong. I'm not even going to go into the fact that there was also a binding that was done by someone who passed away. I think they gave their last life energy to bind me. That's very difficult to break a binding that's placed on you when it's like that. But this was, you know, a thing where I ended up shooting for the moon without even having a pair of jumping sneakers on. I mean, it was ridiculous to try to break the laws of reality. I got too cocky. My intention was wrong. And my failure was epic and profound. It created guilt. It created doubt. It created all these things. It ended up being better for me, as you and I have discussed. I had to have that experience. I had to fail. I had to become mature. You know, once you hit your 40s, as you and I seem to notice, everyone, you know, in their 20s, they'll have this infatuation with it, and then they'll drop it because of whatever reason. And then a lot of people will come back later. You know, for us, it's like we seem to notice it happening a lot to people in their 40s or their late 30s or something. Once you hit a certain maturity, you get a couple of gray hairs, just a couple. You don't need a full beard of gray. Once you start having this kind of maturity, you can go back into it again, because your intentions are more sophisticated. You're more in touch with your darker side, I guess. You're more in touch with
you're more aligned with your true self, you know, with the totality of self. most of that, I imagine, is because the older we get, the closer we get to being consciously aware of our own mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And that in turn, I think to a degree, is what allows us to open up to honesty and truth.
That's a good point. Yeah.
That's probably why it works that way.
Well, it's kind of like, when you know someone who's got only a few years left to live or a few months left to live, suddenly they're going to church all the time and all this other stuff. For me, I practice, occasionally, not occasionally, but all the time, various forms of Eastern and Asian and Buddhist meditation and mindset. One of the meditations that Buddhists will frequently use is a meditation on your own death. It's literally, you are supposed to, be calm while you're experiencing the visions and feelings. You're supposed to try to feel. You're supposed to literally invoke your own death in a Western mind. To the Western magician, it would be invoking your own death through meditation to feel what your own death might be like. So you would, for example, you would imagine yourself in a car accident, right? But you wouldn't just imagine it like from third person where you see your body get splattered up and everything. You are in your body and you see your bones breaking. You see the last things that you would see, and then you see your body disintegrating. You see the wailing of your loved ones. You see your dog go through the windshield and splatter on the road. All the most horrible things that you can imagine that would happen in death, you embrace that. And when you're talking about failure, we can come back around to it again and say, if you're not doing things like that, if you're not doing the shadow work, I guess you could call it, if you're not trying to learn your true nature and your true weaknesses and your true strengths like that, if you're not embracing the suck and challenging your comfort zones, your magic will do that for you, and it may make you fail a lot until you figure that out.
Yeah, one of the earliest workings I ever did when I first went to working with Azrael was imagine every possible way I could possibly die.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't just think it, as each one was happening, I was feeling and experiencing it, as best as I could, so forth and so on. I think that's why almost 2 years ago, when I was working the crossing of the abyss and the descent of Anana, and you have to imagine yourself being torn to pieces, being ate alive, all kinds of really weird shit,
Yeah. Sounds very similar. Yeah, it sounds like almost the same.
I think for me, I was like, okay, well, that's different, and even some of the stuff I was seeing being done to me, I was like, holy shit, my imagination ain't that good. What the fuck? That's weird.
I find it very often, like, even in myself, like, I'm usually pretty good with it. But as I'm getting older and it's becoming more of a possibility in my future that I could die. I mean, I'm aging very well. I don't feel like I look my age. If you saw how I looked 20 years ago, you'd say, yeah, you look different, but you don't look like you put on a whole bunch of years. I'm still feeling youthful. I still feel it, but every once in a while I'll be laying there at night and I'll start thinking about, what it will be like for me to be gone or for someone I care about to be gone. And it didn't used to bother me. And now I find myself, not that it bothers me, but I find myself having to hold on to it longer than usual before any sensations of displeasure pass, if that makes sense. I have to hold it tighter than, like, 10 years ago, I would think about my death and I'd go, I hope I die doing something cool or something noble or something that I could be proud of, as long as I don't just die like, stupidly, or at the mercy of someone else. Hopefully, like, if I'm ever captured by terrorists, you're never going to catch me just holding still while they cut my head off. Hopefully I'm the one running away and getting shot. Hopefully that's me. But my point is that now as I'm getting older, I start thinking to myself, well, maybe I would do things I wouldn't normally do to make sure I'd live in that situation. Maybe I would weasel out of it. Maybe I wouldn't be so noble, because now that you have more and more life behind you and you're feeling more and more of a connection to the life that you have, that can also hold you down. It's that attachment issue again. Attachments are a big source of failure in magic. I mean, they really are.
Yeah. I mean, you can be so attached to something, and unwilling to let it go, that it can destroy you and drag you down, take it away from you. I guess I was blessed in one sense that, about 20 years ago, it's easier said than done. When you have nothing to lose, it's not hard to do what I'm about to tell you. So about 19, 20 years ago, I used to think of magic as a living, breathing thing. as if it and I were one, you know, surrounded everything, permeated all things, you know.
The Force.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, I've
Do
heard people equate it to that. But in my thing was that that if there was such a thing as a god or a goddess or anything like that, you know, the magic was it, because it was without form and it was formless and yet powerful and able and capable of doing anything and everything and creating and destroying and the whole nine yards. So, you know, to me, it was divine. But the thing is that I would literally do a rite where, you know, I would straight up state, you know, I give the whole of myself to the magic, you know. There is nothing I would not sacrifice. And not a lot of people take that path, because the path of sacrifice is, man, it's nothing to scoff at. Don't think that just, you know, that 1 minute you can be that way and the next you can change, because you can't. Because once you start down the path of sacrifice, it's an ongoing thing. It requires even more and more. And it's not that it requires more and more, but you chose this. You decided this, you know, and it's the cost to it.
Yeah.
And, at any rate, then I go and I get married and everything else, you know. First thought I had was, you know, I don't want this being destroyed. Well, then I realized something. Yeah, I have to sacrifice even that upon the altar of self, of becoming, you know. And I think the best thing I ever did was do that. And everything in my life, it's the same way.
Yeah.
You know, I sacrifice everything because I know who I am and I walk this path, and this path is my own. Have I made mistakes and tried to withhold things from it? Absolutely. Have I had consequences because of it? Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a path that you walk, let it be your path and let it be something that you want to walk, not something somebody else tells you to walk.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they have different rules, different laws, and you are bound to it once you start it.
Mm-hmm. I think, like in the Goetia or that current, Belial is an excellent entity to work with in that way, because he's very much about, you know, you have to trust him to destroy whatever he wants to destroy so he can rebuild it. So, you know, like when you're putting, you know, like what you're talking about with the sacrifice too, it's not just that you're giving it to something, it's that you're trusting something else with it. You're trusting those things that you care about, because you don't have the big picture always. You don't always know what's best for you. You don't always know what's right for the world or for your family. And sometimes what's best for you is to lose all of those things you care about. Sometimes, you know, a lot of people, you know, are locked into a toxic relationship with someone, you know, and they will come to me or you or someone else who does magic professionally, and they'll say, you know, I want a spell to bring them back to me, and to keep them and to hold on to them. And that's actually, you know, a very toxic thing that they're doing, not because it's just a baneful spell or something. I do believe many forms of the love magic people think of are baneful, but it's actually because you're actually hurting yourself by trying to hold on to that person. They're not good for you at all. And, you know, like if you were to work with Belial in that situation, Belial would be like, we're going to get rid of this relationship, and you're going to thank me for it, and you're going to be kicking and screaming the whole way, but here it goes. And sometimes when we have an issue in our life that we want to fix, but maybe we lack the courage or the conviction to do it, but we know we need to, it can be helpful to invoke a destructive force like that. You know, like let's say you hate your job, right? And none of your spells to bring you better jobs is working. Well, maybe it's because you need to be put out on the street first. You know, maybe you need to have that bad thing happen to you first. You know, we have to remember that everything that happens to us is part of our true intention as well. So, you know, it's I guess what I'm trying to get at is you have to trust the magic. You have to, like you said, you have to sacrifice it in some. You have to sacrifice your desires and your attachments to magic. It reminds me of an old movie, The Last Unicorn. And here I go with the pop culture reference again, where the wizard Schmendrick, whatever his name was, would chant, you know, magic do as you will, magic do as you will. And that's how he got the magic. Before that, magic wouldn't work for him. But the moment he started saying it like that, suddenly magic started working. I said, magic do as you will, and suddenly it worked. Well, in a very large way of looking at it, you know, you would say, I trust magic to do what it needs to do and not try to control it too specifically or precisely. You know, you have to, like you said, you have to sacrifice these things. You have to have no attachments to these things. And we all struggle with that. Like you said, we all make mistakes about that. I made that mistake with Belial. I refused to approach him for a little bit because I was afraid that, I'm like, well, he's well known for tearing people's lives apart to fix them. And I'm pretty happy with where my family relationships are and things like that. I don't want to lose my wife or risk my job yet until I know what I'm doing with all this again. And I don't know. And he didn't have any of that. He knew that my intention was to have a conversation with him. And he came through and like bitch slapped me. It's like broke up my pity party and was like, you better demand that I wreck your life. And that week sucked. I'm not going to lie. That week sucked. People were in the hospital. I had to go through a lot of stuff. And I laughed through it all. Instead of being afraid of it, I ended up laughing through the whole thing going, I knew all of this was going to happen. And here I am, and I'm dealing with it like a boss. And out of that whole experience, there was another thing going on the side that I had to deal with in a magical sense. There was a community issue going on, and I had to use magic to deal with it. And somehow, despite all of this that should have made me unable to do magic at all these things that were going on that were screwing with my head, I was able to turn that other situation around, and it worked out for the better. And I got the authority that I was asking for him, because Belial's all about bestowing upon you authority as well. That's his big thing, is giving you titles and giving you recognition and giving you positions in the infernal kingdoms and stuff like that. So when this was all over, I ended up coming out smelling like a rose. I had elevated myself socially. Everything else worked out. My family was happy as shit. So I went through all this hell, but it ended up working because I sacrificed these things. I said, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you. It's like when you go to the dentist, go ahead. This is God. Oh God. Oh God. It's kind of like that.
Yeah. It's kind of weird that, years ago in that situation I was in and working with Armin, and Armin destroyed it all. I mean, just literally tore the ground out from underneath my feet. It made me gunshot. Fuck yes, it made me gunshot.
Yeah, right.
And then one day I had to look at it from a particular point of view. Waylon, what if everybody in your life fucking left you and it was just you? What if there was nothing but you? What if you had nothing but just what's on your back and just you? What would you do? Mm-hmm. And that's when I was like, well, I keep on doing what I'm doing because that's who and what I am, and so forth, so on. And then the next words came to me. Then why are you afraid?
Right.
I was like, holy shit, fuck, man, you're fucking right, And this was Armin working with me, and from that point on, even when I got stable and everything else. Even to this very moment, I still look at it in that way. That, if everything went away, what would you do? I'd just keep doing it because it's just, the path is not easy. It's not simple. It is not. No matter what path you choose, no matter what, system you're working, no matter what. But the thing is that, you have to overcome your own fears. But to do so, you have to recognize the fact of what would you do if nothing. You have to hit that moment of voidness of, and you have to enter into the void mentally where it's like, it's just you and the powers that be. What are you going to do? You know what I'm saying? And yeah. That's where you come back full circle to the nature versus nurture, fight versus flight. I think that's where a lot of that came in. Now, a lot of what sculpted my mentality of it was the Buddhist philosophy of all is sorrow. And so the whole unattachment is the release of sorrow, and the freedom from sorrow, I should say. And so, because I take a little bit from here and a little bit from there to hold and make mine. But it's mine. It's what makes it mine. That's how I've made the magic my own.
Yeah.
It's coming up with my own philosophy, my own, way of doing it, being.
It's kind of like, I have a video that I sometimes share. I put it back to private because of various reasons, but I think I'm going to upload it on here. It's a video that's about the origins of reality. And one of the things that is talked about in it is this idea of suffering. And, failures of magic lead to suffering, so to speak, right? Suffering is kind of like the emotional thing I talked about before. You will experience discomfort, but you don't have to suffer from it. You can accept it and live with it. And that doesn't mean that you don't try to make things better for yourself. But this is kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about this Buddhist principle of acceptance and all is sorrow, all is suffering. when the Buddha said that, all is suffering, and that suffering is caused by desire, and that we can end our suffering, he wasn't trying to tell you that you need to find a way to end suffering or all these proactive solutions. The solution is actually to learn to accept what is, and to rejoice in it and understand that it's required for you to experience pleasure at all. You need to have pain in order to experience pleasure. You have to fail at magic sometimes to experience successes. And I think that a lot of the time people get hung up on things. I don't know if this happens to you very often, but I'll get approached by people and they'll say, well, if you are so powerful, if you have all these things going for you, if you can do all these things, then how come you're not a millionaire? How come you don't have this? How come you don't have that? And this is a complete misunderstanding of what we say when we say we're powerful, or that we have power, or that we have authority with spirits, or any of this kind of stuff.
That's not what we attach ourselves to.
That's not what we attach ourselves to. And even if we did, that's not what magic is attached to. It's not what the spirituality is attached to. It's not attached to that. It's attached to liberating you from those things. So I often tell people, like, when you're a kid, you want magic to give you money, sex, power, magic tricks, whatever it is. And as you get older and you get more mature about this, your magic becomes a path of ascension to become, something better. So, it's no longer about having everything that you desire. It's about letting go of your desires and recognizing that, you don't need money to be happy. You don't need the power that you think you need to be happy. You do need to be fulfilled. And that's what it's, and that'll lead to a lot of failures when you don't embrace that.
I agree, man. Dude, that's the best way to put it. I mean, seriously, that's the gist of the whole thing that we've been sitting here discussing.
Yeah. I mean, you have to accept the failures to enjoy the pleasures. Yeah. Yeah. Well, guys, I'm glad you guys all came along. I see some people just showed up, I think. And I think we're getting ready to cut this off. We're trying to keep our streams to less than, 24 hours? Well, I think we're down to about 20 hours now, right? And we're so we're trying to keep things a little bit shorter than what we've been doing. We figure an hour and a half is pretty much all anybody's rear end can tolerate sitting down, and watching us for that long is a long time. So we want to thank you guys for coming. And of course, if you're late to the party, that's fine. This will be uploaded in a couple of minutes. You can stream it for yourself and watch it again. And we're going to try, Waylon and I are going to try to do at least one stream like this a week, I think is our plan. And sometimes more, like sometimes he'll just contact me and he'll be like, yo, let's talk. And I'll be like, all right, let's do it. So I don't know what night we're going to end up on. We're just going to keep playing with our nights to see how our attendance goes. And as our channel grows and as we get more people on Dark Sorcery, I know I'm going to be putting more and more of my content here. And I'm sure Waylon's doing the same thing. We're not losing our own channels though, by the way. We're just going to be transitioning a little bit. I may ignore my channel a little bit for now, because since I am so heavily invested in Dark Sorcery, I feel like I need to put as much of my content here as I can. So if you follow me on the DH Thorne channel, don't unsubscribe or anything. I'll still be putting stuff there. But what I'll probably end up doing is I'll put stuff here first, and then after it's been up here for a week, I'll put it on the DH Thorne channel so that I can keep that going. But is there anything you want to say about like what we should do here? Like, we want to make sure everybody shares all this and get this up. Is there anything any other messages we want to give people, Waylon, as the live team, I guess?
Keep sharing these videos and things. We have our own channels going and all, but we also, we're staying dedicated to this, to doing this as well. We do this to try and share the knowledge that we have, and maybe, just maybe, some wisdom. I don't
know. Occasionally, like I'll stub my toe and some curse comes out, it'll make sense. But no, I agree with that, man. And what's impressive for me is in a week's time, we've almost got, not even a week's time, 3 days time, really, since we officially launched it. I guess it's 3 or 4 days. We've almost got 100 subs already, which is not a lot. I mean, let's be honest, that's next to nothing. But to do that in a few days, we can only say thank you to the people who've invested themselves. We are talking about a black occult channel, and that is one hell of a niche, to try to exploit, because it's a very small niche. It's not You know, it's not like you know, like video game reviews where there's millions and millions of people interested in it. So we're actually happy with the numbers we're getting, and we want to thank you guys for coming. And be chatty, give us comments, be hecklers even. We'll just boot you out of the channel if you're a jerk.
Hell yeah, because we appreciate every single one of y'all. You know?
Yeah. And MK Ultra wants us to sacrifice something. MK Ultra, just come to either of our houses, and we'll make sure that we put you on a nice stone slab. Who do you think would appreciate a sacrifice?
I'll make you a sandwich. What about that?
Okay, we'll make you a sandwich.
A sandwich for you.
We'll make you a sandwich. We'll put you on a stone slab, and we'll give you a sandwich. How about that? We'll sacrifice some peanut butter and jelly.
But you can't have my apple jelly.
I don't like apple jelly. I hate that shit. That's disgusting.
Well, good for you then.
Fuck you, man. You like everything I don't like. How the hell are we like Spirit Brothers? How's that even possible?
Well, you know.
We love you, MK Ultra. Thanks for the joke.
Yeah. We love every single one of y'all, man.
Grilled cheese. Grilled cheese, man. That's right. Grilled cheese.
Yeah. Look at love cheese on peanut butter, man. But it's got to be crunchy peanut butter.
You know, I used to put peanut butter on pizza back in my Ninja Turtle phase. Man, that was actually better than I thought it was going to be.
You're old.
We are old. Shut up. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. You want to call? You want to give us your catchphrase there as to signal the end of the stream?
Until next time, peace, blessings, and power.
See you later, everybody. If I could just find a button.